first things first, I want to get into The Last Dance. And I know a lot of people are, in the 90s and really the late 80s were big Chicago Bulls fans. One of the reasons why, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is one of the greatest basketball players, if not the greatest, to me, the greatest athlete to ever play in professional sports. And he was a special, special player. Everything that we saw Michael Jordan do, it was like out of a video game. It really was. And episode 7 really got down to the 93 Bulls championship. And Michael Jordan, this is a guy that was cerebral. He'd go out there and he pushes players. Practices, you saw him with Scott, on the team at the time of the 93 Bulls, how much he put pressure on some of the players on that team. B.J. Armstrong talked about it, that Michael Jordan wasn't a fun player to play with. Nope. He wasn't a guy that you would like. But this guy knew how to win. He was all about winning. And he took this team on his back, and he made sure that we were going to play as hard as we could as a team.
And it included beating up Steve Kerr, too.
Well, that was in episode 8.
Well, no, but it's the same kind of thing. They were showing that, and they were just showing how hard he was on the players because of how competitive he was.
And really, Michael Jordan's life was structured. As a championship player, he structured his life between family and the game of basketball. And that was it. He was all about his endorsements, obviously with Nike, which you saw in episodes 6 and 7 with the Olympics and Reebok. You know he is a dedicated person, not just to his family and to his team, but his brand.
And then they showed it later in episode 8 with Space Jam. He was dedicated to that, too.
But what Michael Jordan showed you, and really shows us on this, especially in the episode 7 and episode 8 of The Last Dance, is the guy wanted to win, and he would do it at all costs. This is what this guy was all about. He was all about finding a way to win, and he would do anything to get to that championship game or that championship series where he can win those games.
And you could see every episode so far, just chronologically, every playoff series, every guy talking trash to him. He came back stronger than I've ever seen anyone do, in just multiple different instances, multiple different ways. They showed the
even if they weren't talking crap to him, Michael Jordan would put in his head that they were talking crap.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, there was a game against the Bullets.
Right. Who was that guy? Because I never heard of the guy.
He scored 38 points against Michael Jordan, and then the game after, on a back-to-back day where he went to Washington, he scored 36 points in the first half of the game.
Right.
Against the same guy, Scott.
Right. And there was
I think it was Scott.
I forget his name, but he said that, all right, he said that, oh, nice game, Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan said, oh, no,
well,
I never
didn't
said
say
that. I never said that. Right. We found that out later, so that was a whole thing. But again, regardless of if he said it or not, Michael Jordan still took it as fuel.
Michael Jordan always took everything as fuel. If you ever see him go into Madison Square Garden, even when he came back against the New York Knicks after coming back from, in episode 8, you see it, when he comes back from retirement, Michael Jordan went into New York and scored 55 points against the New York Knicks in Madison Square Garden.
LeBradford Smith was the guy's name.
There you go. And LeBradford scored 38 points against Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan did not have a good game. And then the day after, flying back to Washington, he made sure that he was going to let that kid know that he was Michael Jordan.
Yep.
And he did. He showed him. He showed him.
He did that with, 35 in the first half, and then he finished
36 in the first half.
36 in the first half, and then he finished with 47.
Michael Jordan has shown that year in and year out, the talented player that he was, and one of the greatest athletes we have ever seen, not only on a basketball court, but throughout the country, throughout every single sport that we've seen. You talk about Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, in all their respectable sports, even Michael Phelps when they talk about swimming, Carl Lewis when it came to the triathlon. That's where Michael Jordan was. He was on top of the world. He was the biggest superstar, not only in sports, in the world, just like LeBron James is today. Mm-hmm. That's why a lot of people compare Michael Jordan and LeBron James, which there is no comparison to any one of those guys.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing in this series in particular is just how fierce of a competitor and really,
it's not even that. Michael Jordan was just a completely cerebral player.
Right.
That's the type of player that he was.
Just how good of a leader he was, too, intensity-wise, motivation-wise.
Well, that's why they compare Kobe Bryant to Michael Jordan.
Right. And, again, I don't think I mean, LeBron has it to some extent, but I don't think he'll ever have it to what Michael Jordan did. And you're seeing it with not only his rivalries, but his teammates.
I would take that back because LeBron James has proven that. He came back from a 3-1 deficit against arguably one of the greatest basketball teams ever in the Golden State Warriors when they had 73 wins that year. And he came back from a 3-1 deficit and win that game, win that series. And I don't want to hear about Draymond Green because LeBron James had everything to do with it.
Right, and also the fact that Draymond Green should have been suspended earlier in the playoffs, where they might not even made the finals.
But also, Episode 7 taught us a little bit about Michael Jordan's father's death and the murder of his father. Now, I thought Michael Jordan, over the years, and I really never followed Michael Jordan when I was a basketball fan in the 90s because I was a Knicks fan and I hated Michael Jordan. I really disliked Michael Jordan. Everything about Michael Jordan I couldn't stand. I knew how great he was. He was the greatest athlete I've ever seen. And I was a hockey player, and I was so deep into hockey. But basketball was my love. And watching the Knicks get pulverized by the Chicago Bulls year in and year out in the 90s was just disgusting to me.
I found it interesting that at that time, when they were showing that when his father got murdered, why is there such lazy journalism just accusing him of doing it? They weren't having any bad stretches of time. They didn't have a bad relationship with each other. And the such lazy thing that it was gambling that was the reason why, when that's not where his body was found, was just lazy to me.
Well, I also didn't know the story where they found his car 2 weeks before they found the body. They found the car in bushes or in between trees in the woods. And they didn't find anybody. His windows were knocked out. Everything was knocked out. His brand new car was in the woods, and that's all they found of him. Mm-hmm. And they were looking for his body, and they finally found his body in a lake. What do they call that? A bridge?
I think it was a river.
It was a river. It was under the river's bridge.
Okay.
That's where they found it. And Michael Jordan, I didn't know. I thought it was because over the years, you always heard that Michael Jordan was a gambler, and so was his father, and his father liked to gamble. And a lot of people thought that Michael Jordan's father died because of gambling debts. Well, that is so untrue. Michael Jordan even came out on that Last Dance Episode 7 and said that had nothing to do with a gambling death.
Mm-hmm. And again, I just think that it was just so unfairly scrutinized to what Michael Jordan was and his relationship with his father. He wasn't a bad relationship. It's just so impulsive and lazy and just dumb. All the journalism at that time just lazily accusing him. And
also, then you knew the story in '93. Everybody didn't know what Michael Jordan was really going to do, and the stories were coming out from the Last Dance that him and his father had that conversation before the '93 playoffs even began. That he was going to retire in '93 and go and play in the major leagues. That's what he was. That was his love. That was his father's love, and that was the first sport that he got Michael Jordan into when he was a kid.
That was a whole interesting segment too. I didn't even realize Terry Francona was the minor league manager.
I didn't either.
But that was a bit of information, and it's interesting when he said he thought he could have played in the major leagues, which, again, any manager is going to say that in the minor leagues, but it's Terry Francona, who's a great major league manager. Maybe there was some merit to it.
And here's another thing.
We'll never know.
Here's another thing that people didn't know about Michael Jordan. When he came into minor league baseball, he was on a 13-game hitting streak before he went into that slump. Right. And really, everybody said, and then it took him a little while, and then he figured things out. He figured how to hit a curveball and a breaking ball. And then he became a pretty good hitter. And a lot of people believe that if Michael Jordan played a little bit longer, he would have made it to the major league levels.
And you wonder, again, if pitchers maybe took him lightly at the time because, this guy's a 31-year-old, he's a basketball player. And then again, all of a sudden, it's Michael Jordan. Nope, he can still do it.
And Michael Jordan, the greatness that he is, he eventually decided to come back. And you saw it. He wore the number 45. And I remember when he came back in the middle of the season, was at the end of the season, Michael Jordan, when you play baseball, and it's a completely different training of your body. And you heard what his physical therapist / trainer told everybody, in this documentary, that to go from basketball to baseball at the age of 31, it's really going to beat the hell out of your body, and you might never play basketball again. Mm-hmm. And he was very surprised that Michael Jordan decided to come back in the strike season of baseball when the Chicago White Sox wanted to call him up to the major leagues, and he said that he will not go and just be called up because the baseball league was going to be on strike and they were going to bring strike.
He didn't want to be thought of as a replacement player kind of thing.
And so he decided to step away from baseball to go back to basketball. But before that, he reached out to B.J. Armstrong. He met up with B.J. Armstrong, and B.J. Armstrong brought him to the team, and he started having private practices, 3 or 4 private practices with the Chicago Bulls before he decided to come back. And then when he came back, he was like a little kid, a rookie again, because his father was no longer there. He had his father there every single game, every single playoff game. His father was there when he raised those trophies. He was a completely different beast when he came back from baseball to basketball. Yeah. And wearing the number 45, playing against, who was he playing against in the semifinals? I think it was the Orlando Magic. Yeah. And Anderson said, 45 is not 23. And what did he do when he came back? That next game, he came back with the number 23. Mm-hmm. And Michael Jordan had one of those fantastic games.
He had one of those vengeance games that we talk about all the time. Even though they lost the series, I mean, he just showed that he still can get back into the game just as quick as anyone could do. Just playing baseball for, a year and a half? And they were saying it all the time. It's different muscles that are worked out for baseball and basketball, different strength routines, stamina routines, anything like that. So it was just very tough for him to do it that season. But again, after that, we know what happened after that. 72-10.
Exactly. And then you look at episode 8, and it goes right into Space Jams. And after he lost against Orlando, you saw how upset he was and how he wanted to get right back on, right back on the bike. He wanted to get right back in the gym and train. And right after the season, his trainer said, do you want me to reach out to you 2-3 weeks? Usually Michael Jordan takes 2 or 3 weeks off. He went right back into training. Then he started doing the Space Jam movie. And they actually built a gym and a workout session for him that during the 8 hours, 9 hours they were recording the movie. After that, he was doing 2-3 hours of training after that, and then practicing with NBA players that were coming over there and training and playing pickup games with Michael Jordan for 3 hours.
That's nuts. That's like 7-8 hours of basketball all at once. You would think
7 to 8 hours. He did 8 hours of movie roles, then 2 hours worth of training, and then 3 hours worth of basketball, back and back play for 3 hours with guys like Reggie Miller, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen. All these players came, Patrick Ewing, they all came to practice with Michael Jordan because Michael Jordan was so upset of losing against the Orlando Magic. He wanted to make sure that he was in tip-top shape before the 96 season.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting. They said they actually used that as a scouting report for those certain players too. That maybe he hadn't faced in a while, or he didn't face up close. A lot of those players, he ended up gaining a lot of knowledge from just how they played. Because again, movies can script many different things differently, but it's interesting the knowledge that he took in terms of transitioning the movie game into the real game.
And before the season even started, the Steve Kerr incident with Michael Jordan, where Michael Jordan was saying and talking a lot of crap to some of the players because he was upset that these players were having fun on the court and they weren't a part of those championship 93, 92, and 91 championship teams of the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, they were saying, I think there was, 5 new players since Michael Jordan played?
Luke Longley, Weatherton, whatever his name is.
Wennington,
Tony Kukoc,
and Kerr.
Steve Kerr. There was other two. There was two other guys. Okay. There were 2 other guys. There were about 5 or 6 players that were not part of the team or the organization when they won those titles. And Michael Jordan said he wasn't there playing games. He wanted to make sure that these guys knew what he was all about. And Steve Kerr didn't like it. And him and Steve Kerr had a scruffle. Steve Kerr punched him in the chest, and Michael Jordan punched him in the face. And Michael Jordan reached out to Steve Kerr after the practice, after you know what, Phil Jackson kicks him out of the practice, and then goes to Michael Jordan and says, Michael, what are you doing? He says, I took it to a whole nother level. I'm sorry. And he reached out to Steve Kerr. He found Steve Kerr's phone number, not even phone number. He reached out to him in his hotel room. He tried to find Steve Kerr's hotel room, and then he reached out to Steve Kerr and he apologized to Steve Kerr. And he didn't respect. He grew respect for Steve Kerr after that.
Right. That was very interesting that Steve Kerr, who not really thought of as an aggressive guy, would have went after Jordan like that, especially, again, not playing with him before that.
And he said that team completely changed everything, and the 96 Bulls was the greatest, some people say the greatest basketball team ever assembled. When you see the 72-10 Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls, some people try to compare it to the 98 season when they did win the title. This team was probably the best team they ever had and they ever assembled. And Michael Jordan said that this team was the most together out of all the teams.